Your knees are not falling apart because you're getting older. That sentence alone should make you angry, because for years you've probably accepted a lie that let you off the hook. You were told this was inevitable, that this is simply what happens to a body after 50, and so you stopped fighting it. But the truth is far more uncomfortable and far more useful. Your knees are responding to decades of decisions. How much you moved, how much you sat, how much weight you carried, how much strength you built or let disappear. None of that is random. None of that is simply age. Somewhere along the way, you traded movement for convenience, and your joints have been quietly keeping score ever since. This is not about blame for the sake of guilt. This is about taking back control of a story you were told you had no say in. Because if aging were the real cause, every 70-year-old would have destroyed knees, and every 25-year-old would have perfect ones, and you already know that's not true. You've seen 60-year-olds who move like they're 40, and you've seen 30-year-olds who can barely climb a flight of stairs. The difference was never the number of candles on the cake. The difference was what happened to the body in the years leading up to this moment. So if you've been nodding along to "it's just age" as the explanation for your pain, it's time to throw that explanation out. Because it has done nothing for you, except give you permission to stop trying. The moment you stop believing your knees are simply wearing out is the moment you can start asking the only question that actually matters. What changed and what can change back? This isn't a comforting message. It's not meant to be. Comfort hasn't fixed your knees so far, and it isn't going to start now. What you need instead is clarity, the kind that stings a little because it's honest, the kind that finally makes sense of why the pain showed up in the first place. Because once you understand the real mechanism behind what's happening in your joints, you stop feeling like a victim of time and start feeling like someone who finally has a map. That shift changes everything. It changes how you move tomorrow morning. It changes whether you take the stairs or the elevator. It changes whether you keep drifting toward more stiffness and more pain, or whether you finally interrupt a pattern that's been running unchecked for years. This is where that interruption begins. You've been told rest is the answer. Take it easy, stay off it, let it heal. Advice that sounds caring but is quietly making things worse. Your cartilage has no blood vessels of its own. It survives entirely on a process called diffusion, where movement compresses and releases the joint like a sponge, pulling in nutrients and pushing out waste with every step you take. When you stop moving, that sponge stops pumping. The tissue that's supposed to cushion your joint begins to starve, not because it's old, but because it's been abandoned. This is one of the cruelest ironies in joint health. The instinct to protect a painful knee by resting it is often the very thing accelerating its decline. Every day you choose stillness over movement because it hurts, you're not preserving your knee, you're suffocating it slowly, one inactive hour at a time. And it doesn't stop with cartilage. The moment you stop loading a joint regularly, the muscles around it begin to weaken, and those muscles were never a supporting cast. They were the main defense system your knee had. Without them firing consistently, more raw force lands directly on bone and cartilage instead of being absorbed by muscle and tendon the way nature intended. You end up in a spiral. Less movement leads to weaker muscles. Weaker muscles lead to more joint stress. More joint stress leads to more pain, and more pain leads right back to more rest. It's a loop that feels protective and is actually corrosive. This is why so many people with knee pain get quietly worse every single year, despite doing exactly what they were told: resting, waiting, avoiding. They were following instructions built on outdated assumptions, not on how joints actually function. The truth is uncomfortable but simple. Motion is not the enemy of a damaged joint. Stagnation is. Controlled, consistent movement is what keeps that nutrient exchange alive, what keeps surrounding muscle engaged, and what keeps the entire joint system functioning the way it was designed to. This doesn't mean pushing through sharp pain or ignoring your body's warnings. It means recognizing that avoidance was never the safe choice you thought it was. Every week you spend sitting instead of walking is a week your knee loses ground. It will have to fight twice as hard to get back. The sooner you stop treating rest as protection and start treating gentle, consistent movement as maintenance, the sooner you interrupt the exact mechanism that's been working against you. Look at your legs honestly for a second, not with judgment, just with honesty. If your thighs, hips, and glutes have gotten noticeably weaker over the last 10 or 15 years, while your body weight has stayed the same or increased, you already know part of the answer to why your knees hurt. The knee itself is a hinge. It was never built to be the primary stabilizer of your entire lower body. That job belongs to the muscles surrounding it, especially the quadriceps in front and the hamstrings and glutes behind. When those muscles are strong, they absorb the majority of the force that runs through your leg with every step, every stair, every time you stand up from a chair. When those muscles weaken, which happens gradually and almost invisibly if you're not actively working against it, the joint itself starts absorbing forces it was never designed to handle alone. That grinding, aching, unstable feeling you notice isn't necessarily your knee wearing out. Often, it's your knee being left without the support system that used to protect it. Muscle loss after 50 isn't automatic destiny either. It's largely a product of reduced use, and it accelerates specifically in people who avoid resistance-based movement because they assume it's risky or unnecessary at this stage of life. That assumption is exactly backwards. The less you strengthen the muscles around a joint, the more that joint is forced to compensate on its own. And joints are terrible at compensating. They don't adapt the way muscle does. They simply wear under the extra load. This is why two people can have similar-looking knee x-rays and completely different levels of pain and function, because the muscular support system around the joint tells a very different story than the joint alone ever could. If you've been avoiding squats, avoiding stairs, avoiding any kind of leg strengthening because you were worried it would hurt your knees, you may have accidentally removed the one thing that was protecting them. Strength isn't just about how your body looks or how much you can lift. In this context, strength is structural insurance. It's the buffer between your body weight and your joint surfaces. Every rep of controlled, appropriate strengthening work you do is quite literally rebuilding the support beams your knee has been missing. This is not about becoming an athlete. It's about restoring a baseline of muscular protection that was likely stripped away gradually, without you ever noticing it happening, until the pain finally forced you to pay attention. You've probably tried the easier fixes first. A knee brace tucked in a drawer, a jar of cream promising relief, maybe something you read about online that claimed to work overnight. There's nothing wrong with wanting quick relief, but none of those things address why your knee hurts in the first place, and that distinction matters more than you've been led to believe. A brace can offer temporary stability. A cream can create a sensation that distracts from discomfort, but neither one rebuilds strength, restores range of motion, or improves how your joint actually functions day to day. They manage a symptom while the underlying cause continues, unaddressed in the background. This is the same trap so many people fall into with pain in general, treating the alarm instead of investigating what triggered it. Pain is not the problem. Pain is information. It's your body's way of flagging that something in the system, muscle support, joint mobility, load distribution, isn't functioning the way it should. When you only treat the sensation, you silence the messenger without ever reading the message. That's why so many people cycle through product after product, remedy after remedy, and still end up exactly where they started, or worse. The relief is real, but it's temporary, because it was never solving the actual mechanical problem underneath. This doesn't mean every form of pain relief is useless. There's a place for short-term comfort while you address root causes. But if you've spent years relying exclusively on external fixes without ever addressing strength, mobility, or the load your joints are carrying, you've been treating a structural issue as if it were a discomfort issue. Those are not the same thing, and they don't respond to the same solutions. The moment you understand this difference, your entire approach shifts. Instead of asking, what will make this stop hurting right now, you start asking, what is actually causing this to hurt in the first place, and what would it take to fix that? That single shift in questioning is often the difference between people who quietly manage worsening knee pain for the rest of their lives and people who genuinely reverse their trajectory. You are not doomed to a life of creams and braces. You are simply someone who hasn't yet addressed the actual source of the problem, and that is a completely different, far more solvable situation than the one you've been told you're in. Stop asking how to make the pain stop and start asking what your body is trying to tell you, because those two questions lead to two completely different lives. The first question keeps you chasing symptoms forever. A new remedy this month, a different brace next month, always one step behind the discomfort. The second question puts you in a position of understanding, where pain becomes data instead of an enemy. Every ache, every stiffness, every twinge when you stand up from a chair is your body sending a specific signal about a specific imbalance, insufficient strength, insufficient mobility, excess load, or some combination of the three. Most people never stop long enough to translate that signal. They just try to mute it. But once you start listening instead of reacting, patterns emerge. You notice the pain is worse after long periods of sitting, which tells you something about stiffness and circulation. You notice it's worse going downstairs than up, which tells you something about how your quadriceps are absorbing load. You notice it flares after a week of inactivity more than after a week of movement, which tells you rest was never actually helping. This is what it means to treat pain as a mindset shift instead of a mystery to be silenced. It stops being something that happens to you and starts being information you can act on. This shift alone, before you change a single habit, changes how you experience the problem. You go from feeling powerless against an unpredictable body to feeling like someone gathering evidence and building a plan. That psychological shift matters more than people realize, because the version of you who feels like a victim of aging rarely takes consistent action, while the version of you who feels like an investigator solving a mechanical problem usually does. This is not about ignoring pain or pushing through injury. It's about respecting pain enough to actually listen to what it's telling you, instead of just wanting it to go away. The people who make real, lasting progress with joint pain after 50 are rarely the ones who found a miracle cure. They're the ones who stopped treating their body as broken and started treating it as a system that responds predictably to the inputs you give it: movement, strength, load, and recovery. That system has been trying to talk to you for a long time. This is the moment you finally start listening. Movement is not something you do after your knee feels better. Movement is the treatment itself, and the sooner you accept that, the sooner things start to change. Every joint in your body depends on motion to stay nourished, because cartilage has no independent blood supply. It relies entirely on the mechanical compression and release that happens when you walk, bend, and move through your day. Low-impact movement like walking, swimming, or cycling creates exactly this kind of rhythmic loading without overwhelming the joint the way high-impact activity might. This isn't a minor detail. This is the primary mechanism by which your knee stays supplied with the nutrients it needs to maintain itself. People who remain sedentary because their knee hurts are often unknowingly starving the very tissue they're trying to protect. This doesn't mean forcing yourself through sharp, worsening pain. That's a different signal entirely, one that deserves attention rather than persistence. But the dull ache of underused joints, the stiffness that builds after sitting too long, the reluctance to walk because you're worried about making it worse, that hesitation is usually working against you, not for you. Consistency matters more than intensity here. A 20-minute walk almost every day does more for long-term joint health than an occasional intense session followed by days of complete inactivity. Your joints respond to patterns, not isolated efforts. Swimming and cycling offer particular value because they allow significant movement through the joint with minimal impact, making them ideal starting points if walking currently feels difficult or painful. The goal in the beginning isn't performance. It's frequency. It's teaching your joint that movement is safe again, that it can trust load without catastrophic consequence, and that trust is rebuilt slowly through repetition, not through a single dramatic effort. This is often where people get it backwards. They wait until the pain fully resolves before they start moving again, when in reality, appropriate movement is often what resolves the pain in the first place. If you've been sitting more and more over the years because moving felt uncomfortable, you haven't been protecting your knee. You've been withholding the one input it actually needs to function well. Reintroducing movement doesn't have to be dramatic or immediate. It can start small: a short walk after dinner, a few laps in a pool, 10 minutes on a stationary bike. What matters is that it becomes consistent, because consistency is what turns movement from an occasional effort into an actual treatment your joint can rely on. Strength is not vanity, and it was never meant to be optional past a certain age. It is direct, mechanical protection for the joint you're trying to save. The muscles surrounding your knee, particularly your quadriceps, hamstrings, and glutes, are responsible for absorbing a significant portion of the force that travels through your leg with every step, every stair, every time you rise from a chair. When those muscles are strong, they act as shock absorbers, taking pressure away from the joint surfaces themselves. When those muscles weaken, which happens gradually and often without obvious warning if you're not actively working against it, the joint is left to absorb forces on its own, forces it was never built to handle in isolation. This is why building strength around the knee isn't a cosmetic goal, it's structural insurance. 2 sessions a week of focused, appropriate resistance work, the kind that targets the muscles supporting your knee, can change how that joint feels and functions more meaningfully than almost any topical product or passive treatment. This doesn't require intense, high-risk training. It requires consistent, progressive loading that respects where your body currently is while gradually asking a little more of it over time. Bodyweight squats, controlled step-ups, resistance band work, and simple leg exercises can all contribute meaningfully to this rebuilding process. What matters is that the muscles around your knee are being asked to work regularly because muscle responds to demand. It strengthens when it's used and weakens when it isn't, at any age. Many people avoid strength work specifically because they're worried it will aggravate their knee pain, but in most cases, appropriately dosed strength training is exactly what reduces that pain over time by reducing the load the joint itself has to bear. The goal isn't to become an athlete or lift heavy weights. The goal is to restore a baseline of muscular support that likely eroded gradually over years of reduced activity, without you ever noticing the connection to your joint pain until it became impossible to ignore. Think of it this way: your knee was never designed to function as an isolated structure. It was designed to work within a system of surrounding muscle, and when that system weakens, the joint pays the price. Rebuilding that system is not about vanity or aesthetics. It's about giving your knee back the support it's been missing, one consistent session at a time. Your weight matters more than you've probably wanted to admit, not because of how you look, but because of simple, unavoidable mechanics. Every additional pound of body weight translates into multiplied force through your knee with each step you take. Walking alone can multiply the load several times over, meaning even modest weight gain results in significantly more cumulative stress on the joint over the course of a single day. This is not a moral judgment about weight or appearance, it's physics. Your knee is a weight-bearing joint, and the amount of weight it bears directly influences how much wear and stress it experiences over time. This is precisely why even small, achievable reductions in body weight often produce noticeable improvements in knee pain, because you're not just changing a number, you're directly reducing the mechanical load traveling through the joint with every single step. People are often told to lose weight for their knees as a vague, generic recommendation without ever understanding why it actually works, which makes it easy to dismiss or deprioritize. But once you understand the direct mechanical relationship, less mass moving through the joint equals less cumulative stress equals less pain and slower degeneration, the recommendation stops feeling like an arbitrary suggestion and starts feeling like an obvious, actionable lever you have real control over. This isn't about achieving some idealized body size. It's about reducing unnecessary load on a joint that's already working harder than it should. Combined with the strength and movement principles already covered, weight management becomes one part of a larger mechanical strategy rather than an isolated goal pursued for appearance. Every pound reduced is measurable relief delivered directly to your joint with every step you take for the rest of your life. This is one of the most controllable variables in the entire equation of joint health, and yet it's often the one people resist addressing the longest, usually because it's wrapped up in years of frustration, failed attempts, or discomfort around the topic itself. But separated from all of that emotional weight, the mechanical truth remains simple and consistent. Your knees are carrying your body weight through every single movement you make, and reducing that load, even modestly, reduces the daily mechanical stress your joints have been absorbing for years. You can keep telling yourself this is simply what happens after 50, or you can start asking why so many people the same age as you are moving without pain, without stiffness, without the constant awareness of a joint that used to work without a second thought. The difference was never the calendar. The difference was consistent movement instead of avoidance, strength instead of neglect, and appropriate body weight instead of accumulated load carried year after year. None of this happened overnight, and none of it reverses overnight either. But the trajectory can absolutely change, starting with decisions you make this week, not someday, not once things magically improve on their own. Your knees did not betray you. They responded exactly the way any joint would respond to years of reduced movement, diminished muscular support, and increased load, because that is what joints are designed to do. They reflect the conditions they're placed in. This means the pain you're experiencing right now is not a life sentence. It's feedback, and feedback can be acted on. The version of you who keeps waiting for the pain to simply go away on its own is choosing the same outcome you've already experienced for years. The version of you who starts moving consistently, who begins rebuilding strength around the joint, who takes weight management seriously as a mechanical strategy rather than a cosmetic one, that version of you is choosing something entirely different, and the body responds accordingly. This is the point where information either becomes action or becomes another fact you nodded along to and forgot by tomorrow. Nothing in this changes unless something in your daily pattern changes. Not the brace in your drawer, not another cream on the shelf, not one more week of waiting to see if it gets better on its own. Stand up. Take the walk today instead of tomorrow. Do the exercises even when they feel inconvenient. Treat your knees the way you would treat anything else that's carried you faithfully for 50 years without ever asking for much in return. With attention, with respect, and with the effort they've finally earned. The pain you feel right now is not your ending point. It's the exact moment you either keep repeating the pattern that created it or finally interrupt it for good.